Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about the whole problem with ego lifting and people on social media promoting it and literally calling it ego lifting. Is that this is not sustainable. And this is something that all the old school guys, all the OGs out here, we've all tried to tell you people for years and years and years. And then you'll see really young influencers come up who oftentimes, keeping in mind, most of the guys making great gains off their ego lifting are using a lot of stuff, a lot of it, right? And that includes ones who claim to be natty, right? There, again, natty is just a claim. Because at the end of the day, we know that all throughout history, the people who have made the best gains, had the best longevity in the game, have generally controlled their exercises. And am I saying there isn't a place for controlled cheating in which you're safe? Sure there can be, right? Power curls done correctly can actually be fairly safe. There's a place for controlled cheating in which you're chasing a little bit of eccentric overload. But that's not ego lifting. When people start short stroking reps, start just flinging around heavy weights for no purpose other than just the ego lift, this becomes a problem. And the biggest problem is that you're seeing influencers now who are saying stuff like, oh yeah, the smallest ego lifter in the room is bigger than the, whatever, the guy who's telling you to control your weight. But that's not true. Most of the bodybuilding greats who were in it for the long term had pretty strict form. They did a lot of full range of motion, okay? So that's a nonsense claim. It is a complete nonsense claim. And the guys who are like, well, look at the results I'm getting from it. No, you're not getting better results than normal training. You're just increasing your injury risk. And maybe discuss your stack, bro. Maybe discuss your stack that's going along with that instead of claiming it's the ego lifting doing it. Now, for people who will say, but you've done powerlifting, it isn't that ego lifting? No, ego lifting is a slang term, okay? It doesn't mean that anything that you do for ego that's lifting related is not ego lifting, right? Ego lifting is a specific term. It's a slang term. Bodybuilding is technically a slang term. Not everyone who builds their body is a bodybuilder, right? Not everyone who lifts for power is a power lifter. All right, ego lifting is essentially where people do stuff like they fling weights around with bad form just to lift heavy weight. They do all sorts of partial reps and stuff just to lift heavier weight, oftentimes a sloppy form, skipping their lockouts, all this crazy stuff, right? Ego lifting would be someone who goes over and straps up on a whippy bar on a deadlift and maybe even does it in a rack and then jerks it up and then skips the whole lockout, doesn't even lock it out at the top, right? Flinging around half reps with dumbbells with really heavy weight and skipping the bottom of movements. All right. Basically, people who are using cheating just to lift a lot heavier weight and not doing full ranges of motion, these are pretty high on the list. You guys know what ego lifting is. Now, the difference is strongman has a lot of ego lifting in it. Powerlifting doesn't, particularly more modern powerlifting. And I'm not saying powerlifting doesn't have major problems. Let's be clear. There are major problems with powerlifting as a sport. The ego lifting is not one of them. Why? Because everything is strict. In other words, a lot of people who don't follow powerlifting aren't aware when I point out, dude, your lift's not valid. Like, what do you mean? Like you had up and down in the bar when you were grinding it. Okay, that's a perfect example. That's against the rules in powerlifting. When you go to a weight slows and you grind it, the weight can't dip on either side. If the weight, once it starts moving up on a squat, bench, or deadlift, for example, if either side tips down even an inch while you're grinding, the lift is disqualified if the judges see it. That's disqualified. Hey, your butt can't come off the bench. You have to pause it. You can't bounce stuff. You can't hitch on a deadlift. You have to lock your deadlifts in powerlifting. You see a lot of people online who hitch deadlifts and don't lock them at the top. They'll be strapped up and they still don't lock it, right? That's not a valid lift. So quite frankly, we could argue about the ranges of motion. I'd say that's the biggest problem you've got in powerlifting. People gaming the ranges of motion. Right? Maybe counting sumo for shorter lifters as a valid lift. Crazy arches on the bench. Crazy wide squat stances so that you don't have to have as much knee bend to reach parallel, and then barely scraping parallel, with a ultra low bar squat. That sort of stuff we could make points about. But generally speaking, as far as the rest of it goes, no, it's all very, very strict. Benches have to be paused, butt can't come off the bench. No movement of the feet allowed once you're set up. Okay? Everything has to be locked out. No up and down of the bar. So that's not ego lifting, because it has to be pretty strict in competition to count. And that's to be competition legal. People say, well, a 1 rep max lift is going to be ugly. Well, not in a meet, it's not. If it's real ugly, they're going to disqualify it. So no. So let's come over to that point. A really ugly max, and then claiming it's a gym lift, and 1 rep maxes get ugly. That's ego lifting. That's a perfect example. If a lift isn't good enough that it would pass in a powerlifting meet, you're calling it a 1 rep max. Yeah, that's ego lifting, guys. That falls in the category. But let's come back over to the point. Ego lifting gets people hurt. Right? And the people who are ego lifting and blasting a bunch of stuff, aka Sam Salute, using probably higher doses than most IFBB pros. Again, that's the only thing that explains the size in the time frame. And all the ego lifting. All right. He's going to start ripping stuff soon. He's going to start ripping stuff. Strict form is the safest way to build muscle mass. Okay? Strict form. Good solid ranges of motion. Not saying everything has to be to the bleeding edge, crazy, contorted ranges of motion, but you need a good solid range of motion. Weight should generally be controlled. Right? We should be in control of the weight at all times. And that's just common sense when it comes to this stuff. And that's been time proven for generations. And again, I want to point out many of these people who do all this goofy ego lifting and then highlight how it's amazing are young. And they're going to possibly be short timers in the game. Okay, we need to be clear on that. I'm doing this at 47 years old. For many of you, I'm the age of your grandfather. Some of you out there. A lot of you, I'm definitely the age of your dad. This is wisdom that I'm passing down to you on this stuff, if you still want to be in the game in 20 years. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.